You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss Nigeria's economic outlook for the fourth quarter of 2024. Joining me virtually for this conversation is Dr. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals. It's great to have you on this conversation, Doctor.
Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Thank you. Let us begin with the monetary policy hike by 50 basis points by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. This was contrary to the projections of several economists and analysts. With this latest decision on the MPR, how effective do you think the CBN's orthodox approach has been in putting a hold on inflation growth and currency risk?
Yeah, so Central Bank, through Monetary Policy Committee, unanimously agreed to hike rates on 50 basis points, taking rates to over 27%. Now, here is it. It is expected that inflation will curb or inflation will reduce. But unfortunately, we have not seen such dramatic reduction in inflation rate. What we have seen, however, is perhaps a marginal reduction in the rate of inflation from the month of July and August. And when we investigated as an organization what was responsible for those marginal reduction, it was because of harvest, that is food inflation. Food inflation reduced, that affected headline inflation. Meanwhile, when you look at the report for August, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, the core inflation increased marginally. So can we say that the continuous increase of rates is what is responsible for the reduction in inflation? I would say no. What is actually responsible for the reduction, marginal reduction in inflation to about 32%, it's the harvest period that we found ourselves because of seasonality that is applicable within the agro sector. So here is it. Continuous increase in rates. Do we think it will necessarily reduce inflation? The answer is no. A country similar to Nigeria has demonstrated this. The name of the country is Brazil. I can tell you that the Brazil demonstration is what we now know within the economic space as a failed experiment. Brazil, from time to time, would increase interest rates, hoping that this interest rate will lead to reduction in inflation. For decades, Brazil embraced over 30% inflation. Inflation even touched 37% at a time because of the strategy that was adopted. What was the strategy? Increase interest rates, devalue the local currency. After a while, Brazil even introduced a new currency, which of course brought stability only for a short period of time, even though Brazil witnessed some level of growth, 6 to 7%, but unemployment was generally high, poverty rates in Brazil was generally high, and inflation remained high. Isn't this similar to what Nigeria is experiencing, a 2 to 3% GDP rate, which we now celebrate as a positive growth rate in Nigeria, as reported by the Bureau of Statistics. And we also have that inflation is over 30%. This is just the same experiment that was practiced in Brazil that generally we now call a failed Brazil experiment. So to that extent, do I think this will happen, that this will curb inflation, it will bring economic prosperity? I quickly tell you two possible trade-offs that economic literature has identified over the years. The first one is crowding out of employment. When you keep increasing rate, banks, between this week and next week, letters will start flying out from them to their customer because of this adjustment. So what does this mean? What we are going to see is that the cost of borrowing, most especially new ones, and to some extent existing ones, will increase. When this happens, it will discourage investment, even though the goal of government, in a way, is to borrow money so that government can invest and control, also in another way, money supply. And we should understand that monetary tools are highly insufficient to fight inflation or combat inflation in the modern conversation. And if I have time, I would explain why that is the case. So, having done that, what you see again is that it's going to also crowd out employment and growth. That is, I've spoken about growth. Now it's also going to crowd out employment because as people are discouraged in terms of borrowing and there is no investment, there is no employment, there will be no growth. So these are three major factors that continuous or excessive hike in interest rates could cause. Now, we say with this interest rate, we should have had some inflow. If it's working, in that currency, with the high rate of bonds Nigeria is sorting, in some instances at 9% for foreign inflows. And you ask yourself, if we give interest at 9% on FX, how much will we be paying in 10 years? I think your worry is as good as mine. So leave that. Go to local currency. Rate is touching 18%, 16%, 20%. The question is, if you are paying 20% per annum, how much are we going to be paying? Knowing fully well how volatile our debt structure, debt basket is, then you know that we have a lot to worry about. So, but if truly this hike of interest had impacted, we should have seen some significant increase in our reserve to about 50, 60, but that is not what we've done. We should have also seen a major reduction in inflation. But like I said, that there are countries, one of which includes Hungary, includes Brazil. Countries have tried this approach, but unfortunately, it did not work as they expected.
Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted Brazil's case. I mean, the central bank governor has been under immense pressure in terms of the whole management of monetary policy. But you just said that you wanted to highlight further. So, of course, our next part of conversation is that we've seen 850 basis points interest rate hike since the beginning of the year. So, is there no positives in all of this in terms of the impact of the policy, or is it all the downsides at the moment?
Well, for me, what I will talk about is that we are not talking of projection yet. We are talking of what has happened.
Yes.
So if we have had 850, we can also ask from the beginning of the year, what was exchange rate? What is exchange rate today? In the beginning of the year, what is investment portfolio? What is it today? In the beginning of the year, what was inflation that we are trying to combat? What is it today? So the answers are there for us to choose. If truly it has impacted by bringing down rates, if truly it has been impacted by bringing down inflation, National Bureau of Statistics just reported under labor statistics and revealed that unemployment surged to about 5.3%. And many people will think, oh, that's a very low unemployment rate. That is super high. You cannot be having more than 4% when you are using 1 hour a week to measure unemployment. Nigeria is doing beyond that at 5.3%. Because that we are not using 20 hours, neither are we using 40 hours a week. We're using 1 hour a week. So has it really performed? Well, I think the answer is a capital no. On the strategy of increasing rate, I tell you that the Central Bank and Monetary Policy Committee believes that this is the strategy to choose. And for those of us who are researchers, we continue to say that increasing rates has long overstayed. We need to adopt a different method in combating stubborn inflation or demonic inflation in Nigeria.
Yes, combating stubborn inflation. The central bank governor, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, said, well, you may talk about the fact that they're increasing rates, but high inflation doesn't create those economic opportunities. And you've rightly said it. Has investment improved? Has the situation with the foreign exchange improved? A huge challenge. And you said on your handle.
No, well, I don't believe in that argument. I'm sorry, I don't believe in that argument. What we should look at is what kind of inflation are we experiencing? Inflation are induced in two areas. The first area. No, those are types. Those are types. You see, when you study economics at advanced level, you realize that inflation is not just about cost push, demand pull. No, we have kinds of inflation, and in monetary, you must discuss inflation as a monetary economist, not just what we were taught in secondary school or what we were taught in the university at first degree level. No. And that is why it's important for government to find appropriate persons in places. So I will explain to you. We have monetary driven inflation and we have non-monetary driven inflation.
Interesting.
Now, when you have monetary driven inflation, what is the cause? It is when a country, and it's important we listen to this, and those that are viewing this to be very conscious. When a country believes, after being convinced or confused that the country's currency is too strong, therefore reduce the value. That's monetary.
Mm.
It is not you and I that announce a new rate.
Yeah.
And what method are we adopting? First method will be, let's float our currency, knowing fully well that the local currency is susceptible to devaluation.
Mm.
Studies led to a milestone devaluation, and you saw that all through the face of Governor Emefiele. The recent strategy under Governor Yemi Cardoso is the reduction, in the value of naira through what we call flotation of the exchange rate or the currency, and that took naira from about 700 now to about 1,500, 1,600, around that corridor. That said, the second method or the second kind of inflation is called the non-monetary inflation. So the non-monetary inflation are those inflation that are caused by sudden increase, sustained increase in prices, such as increase in the price of PMS, and a few other things, such as increase in the price of food, because there is supply side challenge. Now, if you are going to solve this problem, and this is why it's important you find monetary economists so that we don't make mistakes. Now, when you want to solve the non-monetary challenge, you don't use monetary solution. It will be wrong. If central bank wants to solve the problem of inflation in Nigeria today, we can do it in 1 month, or by the time they are meeting in November, and the Monetary Policy Committee advised Mr. President to peg the naira. And the question you want to ask me, and many Nigerians have asked me, is where will the money come from? On daily basis, not my figure, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, from the GDP report, Bureau of Statistics shared, reveals that nearly 700,000 barrels of crude is stolen on daily basis. Multiply that by $80. Multiply that by 365 days. You have over $20 trillion. I mean, I beg your pardon, not 20 trillion, $20 billion. What do we need? What do we need exactly?
That's enough to show up the foreign exchange.
So when you say that where the money, that is one out of about 7 windows of ensuring that you protect your economy. I will give you instances. Germany after the war, Germany was particularly involved in the war. That ended in 1945. Obviously, was the two. We have the Western Germany, we have the Eastern Germany. The two were going to come and unionize to form one, but they had a local currency that was extremely bad. In fact, in Germany, the economy was in a turmoil.
The Deutschmark.
Poverty, hunger, and deprivation. The same Germany today. But Japan understood that they need to do something about their currency. If not, all the policies will be a waste. And check, not just Nigeria, many African countries, with the exception of 2. What has happened to our currency? From Nigeria to Tanzania, to Ghana, to Cameroon. What has happened to our currency? To Kenya, to Uganda. Our currency have lost value. Check what happened in the UK. Don't let me digress too much. I go back to Germany. It's important to understand that Germany changed their currency to Deutschmark. The Germans changed their currency to Deutschmark.
The Deutschmark.
And Deutschmark was pegged against the dollar. There may be states where you may want to deliberately devalue or improve, but not to say that the currency should float. In today's world, America remained that US dollar remained that currency that the time of time and have stood the stand of time. And the whole world, whether we like it or not, significant part of the world, over 80% of the whole world, believe in American currency. So when inflation is monetary driven and you are using non-monetary approach, it will lead in crisis. If inflation is non-monetary and you are using, if inflation is monetary, like devaluation, and you are using supply side or any other strategy to solve it by sharing money for people so that they can afford things, especially sharing bag of rice, it will not solve our problems. It does not mean, and I need to put this caveat, it does not mean the intention of political class are wrong. It does not mean the political class don't want to solve the problem, but it only means that they don't know the exact solution
from their approach.
They don't know the exact thing. They are not diagnosing the problem correctly.
Okay, Doctor.
Especially with the issue of inflation.
Let's move on to this other part now. We're approaching the 4th quarter of 2024. You really shared some very deep insights, and of course, with the challenge of increasing costs to premium motor spirit, also known as fuel, and electricity that will impact households and businesses. You have already talked about that, followed you on your social media. You said there's the need for a right mix of fiscal and monetary policy steps to stabilize the economy and avert a social crisis. So we've seen the Economic Stabilization Bill, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council. It has several issues, but what, of course, is standing out is the foreign exchange reforms, empowering central bank for foreign exchange liquidity, issues around incentives for private sector, value-added tax, and even around gas. What is your take on this ESB? Is it the game changer? Can it, in a way, begin to help to address the fundamental issues that you've raised in the economy?
Well, implementation is my concern for most of the policies of government. Government always know how to present white papers, present all manner of documents such that if properly implemented, the challenge is in implementation. So government have said there will be quite a number of policies, difference, but where is the implementation? This is not the first time we are hearing that private sector will be supported and different things will be done, but have we had the will to implement? So the elephant in the room here is implementation. So do I think we can implement the policies and see change in the fourth quarter? The answer is a big no. It's a big no. There are short-term wins that we can have. But there are also long-term that we must stay to have. So hoping that things will dramatically change between now and December, I doubt. Because already the NNPCL, through a subsidiary, has announced an increase in pump price. What we see, what we had at the second quarter is not what we are experiencing in September. And that will send information to when Bureau of Statistics will release new inflation numbers. Inflation is expected to go high. If it does not, then we have a lot to question about MBS reports. A lot of people want to see what the inflation number will be for September. Because we're experiencing it. So the chances are high that we have not gotten to the point of deflection yet on inflation. So, but whether it will be managed for the number not to be so high, well, I don't know. But I know that with the data we have picked, first week, second week, and we are currently picking, inflation projection is certainly going to be beyond 32%, maybe back in 33%. If we look at it, except we are using different platform for analysis, but what is showing that it will go up. Now, if this be the case, what will the growth be? Because we are using real GDP in Nigeria, not nominal. By the time we make provision for inflation in our nominal GDP, it tells us that the goal, the intention of government to achieve 6% GDP growth rate may not be achieved. At best, year-on-year government may be, as at the end of the year, maybe around 40 to 50% of that target. That is between 2% to 3% GDP growth rate. And like Brazil did, Brazil was very quick to celebrate that they are 6% GDP growth rate, 5% GDP growth rate, 7% GDP growth rate. But what happened to the economy? The economy went on its knees. Why? Because the foundation, the economic parameters, the macroeconomic indicators must communicate. What is happening to exchange rates? For the country, Brazil was very bad, was very poor, was very weak. Is that what is happening to Nigeria? Highly unstable. I heard the central bank governor say that we are seeing some level of stability. Well, I don't particularly agree with that statement. I cannot call that stability. From 1,005 to 1,006 to 1,690 back to 1,005 is difficult for us to make projection. And I want many people to go and study United Arab Emirates. Since 2014 or 15, the currency remained 3 dirhams 65 pence to $1. The highest it has gone is 3.69, 3.65 to 3.69. So we have to be very deliberate because inflation will weaken our political institutions and even our environment generally. The entire economy to weaken it. So my advice strongly is we need to do something about it and look beyond using monetary tools. Yes, monetary tools should even be combined rightly. And in combining it, we need to look at policy around the exchange rate flotation, apart from just raising interest rates. I pity banks now at 30%. I mean, 50% cash reserve requirement or cash reserve ratio has been announced by the Monetary Policy Committee. If you keep that on one side and liquidity ratio is 30%, what are we left our bank with? 20%, all in the name to reduce money supply, which is what the question really did not cover.
Yeah.
So how will you not have increase in money supply? When what your naira worth, it now worth about 1/3 of the same after 2 years.
Very
if I must buy the same thing, especially the essentials, I need more liquidity. So to you, at the central bank, it will interpret to having more liquidity. To you. To me, it will interpret to having insufficiency.
Yeah.
What does naira mean? I wish I had maybe 500 naira to show you. 500 naira means that if you give me a pen, which was 500 naira today, I will hold your pen and tell you that by next week, I will pay back. This is a promissory note with 500. But you know the truth? If the naira gets devalued, you will get 500 that is lower than the worth of your pen.
Yeah.
That is why inflation will set in. So you will now not sell at 500 again. You will sell at 700, 800. Because the currency has been weakening. And you see the real root. The most devastating of the two kinds of inflation is not number, it's monetary. When a country deliberately devalues our currency, hoping to get foreign inflows, let me ask you, since we devalued, as our foreign reserve dramatically grow to $100 billion, since we devalued, not yet. Yeah. Mr. President has made all efforts to go to India, went to Germany, he went to United Arab Emirates, different places, using his office to woo investors. 1 year still counting. They are not yet here. Do I think they will come in their numbers? No. Why? Because of the point I would like to anchor, faith. Currency is like faith. The way people in religion believe that God exists, and by the way, I believe too. The way they believe, we believe that God exists, is the way we must believe in our currency. But unfortunately, when this currency is susceptible to devaluation, it's susceptible to reduction in value. People will do what took place, I think, in the 60s or 70s in Turkey. And people need to read about the Turkish washing machine.
Yeah.
What did Turkish do? And what did they do? Instead than holding their own currency because of stringent policies in Turkey to convert their money to pound sterling or Dutchman or dollar. What did they do? They stopped buying washing machine because they knew Orbs in Turkey at a time must always come and buy washing machine. And the price was going up. The value was even going faster than inflation. The same thing with all currencies. When it's susceptible to devaluation, there will be a concept of some sort called the Turkish washing machine. A job, monetary authority, indeed our fiscal authority, is to converge in terms of policy to know that currency, naira is not just a currency. It is a determinant of worth of our people. And our job as government is to protect the same.
You've highlighted critical issues around the monetary aspect of inflation. There's a non-monetary factor. But I'm saying that number 4 item in the proposed changes from the ESB, the Economic Stabilization Bill, if this foreign exchange regime, the reforms takes place, central bank is empowered more, and we can get forex liquidity, it will be very important at this time, strengthening the naira, like you said, for this economy.
Well, for me, I really don't know the strategy we want to use to get forex liquidity because of the volatile nature of our economy, because of level of confidence in our economy. First of all, for that...
I want to bring to you, my previous guest, Dr. Ottoabasi, has talked about a low-hanging fruit, unlocking value from our assets. Isn't that a low-hanging fruit?
Now, unlocking value from our asset, we will not sell it again. If you sell it today, you will not sell it again. Economy is not a sport. Economy is a flow. even though we use the two. And this is the challenge I have with classicals. It's the challenge I have with classicals.
But
we have
Dr.
been using classical approach to solve. I read classical economics at all levels.
Okay.
If you sell today, what will you sell tomorrow?
Now, it's not necessarily saying sell. He's saying that financialize it, leverage the markets. For example, the NNPCL lists some aspect like Saudi Aramco, lists some of the assets in a way that valuation is there, and then you can gain liquidity from it, like Saudi Arabia has been able to achieve with Saudi Aramco. Isn't that
I
one?
agree 100% with leveraging that.
Yeah.
But investors will also look at the pattern. How are you running the institution right now?
Yeah.
If it is the way we run NNPCL, you think serious investors that want to come invest in hard currency will like to put their money where there is little or no transparency? Nobody will invest in such institution. So you see, there are pillars of economic success. There are 12 of them. Yeah. Transparency is transformation. NPCL is not as transparent as it should be, at least for today.
So, Doctor, we can anchor on that. We can anchor that transparency is very important in this administration to begin to see how we can unlock those
exactly
for the assets we have. And that's how we can even begin to achieve some stability. Because like you rightly said, we've seen a lot of visits across the world, but we're still expecting foreign direct investments to come on board. And you've really highlighted so much around what we need to do to move our economy forward. But because of time, we would have you again to discuss around the economy, but you've really enlightened us again about some aspect of inflation. Of course, that's deep level, but I want to say that one of our leading analysts in the country said that there's a need for understanding microeconomics in a way that households can relate with. So I think that's what the kind of thing we need more in Nigeria, breaking down.
My goal is to break economics down to everybody. I want to teach economics. I go to primary school. Yes. I taught economics to primary 2 children. Yeah. You know, when you talk about inflation, guess how I taught them? I said they should bring down their ruler. A full ruler is 12 inches or 30 cm. If it no longer worth the same, if it no longer worth the same, there is a problem. A full ruler, because my money is worth certain amount. You are now telling me that this same ruler is not as long as 12 inches again, there is a problem. I said that is what we call inflation. A primary 2 student understood ruler. He uses this to measure. So if you're now saying that your ruler can no longer get your 12 inches is no longer 30 cm, then there's a problem. I said that problem in money terms is what we call inflation. So that's how they can use and know that, okay, inflation is not really good. And when Apple school fees will increase, daddy will pay more. Mommy will pay more. What must we do? So those are ways, and so because we are not making any impact. If the public, if the household does not understand, and we are talking on television, on social media space, using big jargons. So it really does not really make any difference at the end of the day.
Definitely. Very clear what you've said. We need investment, we need growth, we need stability. But of course, transparency is important. The short term now is that we can unlock value from assets, leveraging the market. And of course, let's see if the ESB proposed to National Assembly passes is implemented. But of course, very interesting conversations. I like the way you explain it to your students. That's what we want all the economists to do. Break it down in a way that households can understand. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals, for this very, very deep insights looking at developments in the Nigerian economy and the outlook for the fourth quarter 2024. Very, very rich insights. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Thank you. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this very, very interesting conversation, I must say, on the economy, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow our social media platforms to engage further on this program. Until we come your way again, enrich yourself with knowledge of socioeconomic developments around you. It is wise. As we celebrate our 64th anniversary as a country, it is important that transparency is embedded in our governance system so that we can begin to build that trust, bridge that gap of social contract, achieving a social contract where government is responsible to the citizens and citizens do their part to build the nation. It must begin now because the gaps are huge. And we must address income inequality, challenges of high inflation, unlock liquidity that would strengthen our currency, deepen our revenue, and give us that window to invest more in projects that will achieve inclusive economic growth. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.